It's our 10th episode. We have a woman entrepreneur on the show today. She took her father's one laboratory business to India's largest diagnostic chain with about $1.5 billion in market cap. When I first read about you and started following you, it was in early 2016. I think you pulled off a very, very bold move, and I remember thinking that this woman is fearless. She got Street Fighter's instinct.
I thought you were going to say this woman is crazy. What's wrong with her?
What made you decide to come back to India?
All my friends stayed back. This was 2000, 2001. India was not shining yet. I think for me, there were two influences at the time. I worked in Wall Street. I worked in startups. I did a bunch of stints. And nothing felt like it really got me. And I was blown away with the idea of social capitalism. That you can build businesses which are profitable, but you can do that to truly impact the world in a positive way.
So a 22, 23-year-old, no background on the clinical side, woman. How did you build trust and credibility in, let's say, those early days?
Honestly, the biggest challenge was to take a clinic or a lab, which was a doctor's lab, and to convert that into an institution. Before going to the acquisitions, I would say that was the harder part. Change management actually was very difficult. Because one, like you said, people felt ये तो बच्ची है. Second, तो इसको कुछ पता नहीं, medical है नहीं. And third, लड़की है, ये तो अभी यहाँ 3-4 साल है, फिर इसकी शादी हो जाएगी, वो भाग जाएगी यहाँ से.
And post the handshake, how difficult it was for you to make everyone follow the same SOP?
Very hard, very hard.
When you took over as the CEO and MD of the company, what were the first few things, immediate priorities in your mind to cover up for the, so to say, the lost years in the, let's say, the first leg of your journey?
I made a big change of pivoting to retail business at that time. Because what would happen is the hospitals would outsource the tests, and when they had enough volumes, they would get their own machine and insource it. So what happened is every year, your customer was becoming your competitor. Yeah. How is that a business model that is scalable?
If you were to go back to Vault today, what were be the top 2 healthcare ideas to which you will give a check?
I think I'm about to give check to many ideas, but I certainly believe there is a big opportunity for aggregating the hospital space and orthopedic chain, skilling. There's a great opportunity in what you guys are trying to do. I think there's a great opportunity in mental health, great opportunity in IVF.
For viewers who are watching this show, you know who to contact. In your professional journey, what is the best piece of advice that you have received as a CEO and from whom?
Deepak Parekh told me, and he told me, he said, Ameera, you're about to take a massive jump from a building and you have no safety net. You need to take out a little bit of money from the business and put it away into a safe deposit. Lock it up and do not invest it in equity. Do not invest it in anything risky. Don't put it in real estate. Don't do anything with it. Put it in a fixed deposit and make sure that you're earning safe returns on it. What I don't do and what I say no to is actually more important than what I say yes to. I realized that when you keep accepting every opportunity that comes your way and you don't say no, you actually diverse and disperse your energies in so many different directions that you build a very complex and a very unwieldy business. And you may then have a small choto business sitting somewhere far away. But when a problem hits that business, your entire attention will be running there.
Yeah.
And you will actually forget about your core. So even till this date, if I add something to my life, I exit something from my life.
Hi viewers, I'm Vivek Sinha, the founder and CEO of Emversity, and I welcome you all to this healthcare-focused podcast series, The Prognosis. So the idea behind launching this podcast was to help create next generation of leaders for the healthcare industry. And we thought, what could be a better way to do this than let leaders of today groom leaders of tomorrow? So in each episode in the podcast, we'll be talking to a top CEO or an entrepreneur from the healthcare industry. So if you're an industry professional or a clinician or an entrepreneur building for the healthcare industry, then this podcast is for you. This podcast is brought to you by the Emversity team. We are a training and recruitment platform for the healthcare industry. We do 2 things in service of our mission, which is to address the global shortage of doctors, nurses, and allied healthcare workers. First, we run work-integrated degrees and diploma programs, which are curated along with the top healthcare companies and NACA Plus universities. And second, we also run an online jobs marketplace called Resume with an RX. Now, Resume is a portal which is a 10 times smarter way of getting hired by a top healthcare company in India. All right, let's dive right in. Welcome to another episode of The Prognosis. This is a very special episode for us for 2 reasons. One, it's our 10th episode. Now, I remember how the first episode happened. I was just meeting Prashant Tandon of Tata 1mg generally to understand more about the diagnostic sector. And I thought, why do we not record it and put it out for others to learn as well? So how it unraveled, it's very satisfying. And the second reason what makes it very special for us is that we have a woman entrepreneur on the show today. She took her father's one laboratory business to India's largest diagnostic chain with about $1.5 billion in market cap. Joining me on the show today is Ameera Shah, Executive Chairman and full-time Director of Metropolis Healthcare. Welcome to the show, Ameera.
Thank you so much.
So I still remember when I first read about you and started following you, it was in early 2016. I think you pulled off a very, very bold move. And I remember thinking that this woman is fearless. She got street fighter's instinct. So it's absolute pleasure to host you on the show today, Ameera.
Thank you so much. I thought you were going to say this woman is crazy. What's wrong with her?
No, street fighter instinct is what I thought, and especially in this industry. On that note, Ameera, I would like to double click on something. This is the 10th show and only the second woman entrepreneur. And this data set, I believe, is non-trivial because as an outsider, when I look at the industry, making it big is not easy for women in any other sector, but especially in an age-old industry like healthcare. How easy or difficult was it?
I would say it's easy and difficult, both. And the reason I say that is because surprisingly, I think healthcare is a little easier than most other industries from two angles. In healthcare, the thing that's against you is that everybody wants white hair, older male, sort of somebody who's very experienced, So it's not only gender, it's also age, actually. That these two as a combination actually hurt you together. If you're young and male, you're better off. If you're young and female, you're slightly more disadvantaged.
And if you're young and female and not a doctor,
then it's a far bigger complexity, right? So I think it's not about one thing stacked against you; it's multiple things. But overall, I think healthcare is, like I said, is easier than some other industries because fundamentally, I think the skills that are required to succeed in healthcare, some of them are very naturally innate in women. Not all, but at least in some. Just the feeling of making other people feel cared, the sense of compassion, the sense of connecting the dots. These things all come very naturally to us as women, right? And these are all very important things that you actually need to be successful in healthcare because while healthcare is a business, it's first caring and then it's a business, right? And you actually cannot be successful in healthcare long term if you do not know how to truly and authentically take care of other people. And I think that's why I say it's a little easier.
Great. Ameera, let's start your story from the beginning. Why don't you take us through... Actually, let's go in your formative years. What were some of your early influences in your life that shaped your personality, your value systems, your thought process?
So I think 2-3 things. I think one thing is my parents always were not at all what they call today as helicopter parents. They never micromanaged us. We did what we wanted. There was no sort of telling us constantly, do this, do this, do this. They actually lived their own lives and they lived their lives to the best of the ability that they wanted to for themselves. If they had certain dreams, they lived them out. If they wanted to be hardworking, they were hardworking. So growing up, I saw parents both who were very hardworking, who were very conscientious about doing things the right way and not doing too much jugaad, but really being very comfortable with following the law, following the right way, doing things like that. I saw my mother be deeply concerned about social impact. I saw my father be deeply concerned about excellence. But there was no talk about money in the house. That was actually what I remember the most. There was never a conversation around, we make so much, let's buy this car, let's go on a fancy holiday. I mean, we never grew up rich anyway, but we grew up, compared to India, upper middle class. We had a comfortable roof, we had comfortable this, but there was no indulgences. Like, I didn't have a car to go to school. I was very much going walking. I was going by bus to college. Not because we did not have a car and driver at home. We did. But because my parents wanted us to stay grounded. So I think those were the very clear things I remember. The third thing I think was, I spent a fair amount of time doing extracurriculars. So I was academically never very strong. I was, at best a B grade student. But I never got a push from my parents to say, how can you not excel, be a A grade student, none of that. But I was always very much into extracurriculars. I was a leader. I was, organizing events for people. I was, the prefect in my school, etc., etc. And they encouraged that. So early days, I remember going for a lot of mountaineering, a lot of hiking. Again, realizing that nature is bigger than all of us, and you have to learn to adapt. Suddenly, it may be sunny and very hot, and you have no water, and suddenly it's raining, and suddenly there's a storm, and suddenly you don't have a place to stay. How do you adapt to each situation without crying, without getting upset, without getting scared, but actually taking it head on and say, let's find a way around it, right? And I think that was actually a very essential part of me growing up as well. So I think some of these things.
Great. Your sister is also a doctor, like both your parents, right? So why did you not go towards medicine? By the way, was there a choice, a compulsion, or you were totally free to choose whatever you wanted?
Zero compulsion.
Mm-hmm.
I was completely free to do what I wanted to do. So was my sister. She, I think, had a natural inclination for science, so she went into that, and then she decided she wanted to be a doctor. Now, whether it was her own feeling or a feeling of my parents are doctors, so I want to be a doctor, I don't know. But she enjoys what she does. I actually never had that keen desire in science. I was always, I went to HR college more because my friends went to HR college. So my decision seemed to be more determined by people than it was really by the passion of the subject. I wanted to go to Xavier's for arts, but I landed up going into commerce. And then I realized very quickly that frankly, there's nothing to learn here. And so in the 11th grade, I started doing my SATs. This is all myself. There was no my parents' choice in this, or even they did not even have knowledge on that subject. I went to them and told them, look, I want to do my SATs and I want to go to the US. And they said, okay. I found my teacher. I did my classes. I did my exams. I came with the results. I applied. I got my reference letters. I did my admissions myself. Everything I did.
Wow.
And I went to them and I said, I'm going to UT Austin. That's how it happened. And they were very kind and said, okay, you're going. That's fantastic. And they supported it like they always support everything. And I went off, and I remember clearly I was at the airport, and there were 3 or 4 other kids from Bombay going to UT Austin at the same time. This University of Texas at Austin. And I remember all the other parents were crying, and the kids were crying. And I remember my parents were not crying, and neither was I. And I was just looking ahead, and I was so excited, and I was like, okay, this is a new chapter. And I was going, and I remember that because it was so stark to me that I think for me, there was a feeling of excitement, optimism. Actually, there was less of a feeling of sadness or I'm going to miss this one or that one. And I think the same way my parents, I'm sure they were sad to see me go, but they were very excited for me to go. So, I think it tells about how the human relationship has been important at home. But what's been more important has been sort of go live your life. And we are not ever going to hold you back because we are crying or we are making you feel bad that we are going to miss you, etc., etc. So I went to college, and the first year my parents paid for me, and then I found a scholarship on campus and a job on campus, which allowed me to pay half the tuition that I was paying the first year. So I used to pay half the tuition, and I used to work in the summer, and I used to work during the week. I mean, in college, and whatever I used to earn, I used to pay for my tuition and for my living. So then from the second year onwards, I didn't take any money from my parents, and I was on my own. And that actually was very important, not again because they couldn't afford it, but because it created a real sense of confidence that you can be independent financially at the age of 18 on your own feet.
Yeah, very few people are able to do that.
Yeah, and whether you need to or not, just the fact that you can is a very empowering feeling.
Sure. So you studied abroad, and I believe after completing the study, you also had a stint there.
Yeah.
Right? That was with Goldman.
Yeah.
So as you say that you were not from money. I mean, the family was not rich, but you still had a good platform.
Yeah.
What made you decide to come back to India? And let's say, why not work abroad? Because that used to be the dream those days, right?
Yeah. I mean, all my friends stayed back. This was 2000, 2001. India was not shining yet. That happened much later. And at that time, all people who went to the US or Europe or whatever stayed there. Nobody came back to India. I think for me, growing up, one of the things that you asked about that really struck me was I never felt the need to be like everybody else. In our family, there was a lot of comfort, especially from my dad. He always said, weird is good. And what that means is basically be different. You don't have to follow the crowd. And what in India, we always say, oh, weird, this person is weird. Usually means, that ye alag hai, mujhe samajh mein nahi aata. And he changed it and flipped it on its head and said, weird is good. So that always stayed in my brain. And I never felt the pressure, ki, arey yaar, everybody else ye kar raha hai, to main bhi kar leti hu, sort of thing. So I think for me, there were two influences at the time. I worked in Wall Street, I worked in startups, I did a bunch of stints, and nothing felt like it really got me. And I think what I was looking for, there was one stint that really got me, was I worked in a startup. We were 5 of us.
Okay.
And I loved the work because I was at the age of 19 or 20. I was doing competitive intelligence. I was doing strategic benchmarking. I was doing how are we going to make the company's USP. I was doing strategic stuff.
Sure.
And that for me was really exciting, that I was one of the 5 people. That means I was 20% of the workforce. And if I didn't show up to work, I was going to be missed.
Yeah.
I think for me, that was a really feeling of like relevance, right? And so I think I knew I wanted to do something in a smaller firm. I did not want to do one of these. I'm one of 20,000 people. It just didn't rock my boat.
Mm-hmm.
And second, I started reading at that time. I remember 97, 98, very clearly. I read about Muhammad Yunus, the Grameen Bank, and what he was building in microfinance. And that time, microfinance was a completely new area.
Yeah.
It really didn't have much coverage. And I was blown away with the idea of social capitalism, that you can, build businesses which are profitable, but you can do that to truly impact the world in a positive way. And I was just like, wow, it was like a serious aha moment for me. And I think that's why I came back to India, because I said, look, what works for me is to build a business which may be for profit, but it truly has a impact in the world. And that's how I came.
Yeah, the humongous humanity that you can serve in India or
That's
this
right.
part of the world,
You
can't do
anywhere else. And how much ever we all crib and complain about this problem in India and that problem in India and whatever, the reality is, if you really want to make a difference, there is no better place to do it.
Sure. Once you were in India, knowing you as a person, you won't settle for anything that is, let's say, not significantly large in terms of impact, not just in terms of, let's say, valuation, etc. At what point did that aha moment come to you about Metropolis? This time, what was this, or let's say some eureka moment where you thought that you can take Metropolis from where it was back then to, let's say, something very, very significant?
So I think when I was thinking about whether to come back to India or not, I remember chatting with my dad, and I was telling him, I'm thinking I found this company where I'll do this job, and or should I come back to India? And I was like, I don't know, I'm not sure. How do I decide? And he asked me a question, and he said, Ameera, do you want to be an entrepreneur or do you want to be an executive? And I was like, what is that? I don't even know what that means. Like, what is the difference? And he explained it to me and said, look, do you want to do something of your own, or do you want to have a job in a company? And both of them are good choices. But if you want to be an executive, there's no better place than the US, because you can climb the ladder there. There's a mature track, etc. But if you want to be an entrepreneur, India is the place to be. So that's how it clicked to me. And I said, okay, let me come back to India, because I was anyway wanting to, because of making the impact here. But I felt, okay, I can do something on my own. I like small companies. I don't want to be in a large company. So that's how that choice was sort of made. So I came back to India actually for a couple of months, 2-3 months, and in the summer. And I actually spent some time in the lab with my dad's lab, and I spent some time with my mom's clinic, right, in both of them. And I wanted to sort of assess that and understand for myself, what is the healthcare opportunity? And is there an opportunity, and do I want to do anything with either of these things? Because while both of them were clinics and small in nature, the platform is a platform.
Sure.
And we can't shirk it. However small or big it is, there's something there you can build on is wonderful.
Yeah.
So that's when I sort of felt that pathology was actually going to be easier to institutionalize, because it had less to do with the individual doctor. While gynecology was so deeply entwined with the individual doctor that the person that I was like, I don't know what role how I can scale this. And that's how I came back and then sort of said, okay, you know what, I'm going to pick up this lab and then start to institutionalize it. So my dad and I worked together for the first 2-3 years closely together. And he was the wise one who realized that our styles are totally different.
Okay.
And he realized there cannot be 2 chefs in the driving seat. He very sweetly, and also because he was very ready to just chill, he said, look, I'm going to take a back seat. And then from them, he sort of became sort of semi-retired.
Wow. Take us through the initial few years. While doing my research on you, I read that you traveled across the country, acquiring smaller lab chains. That's how you started, right? So a 22, 23-year-old, no background in on the clinical side, woman. How did you build trust and credibility in, let's say, those early days? Because you're going and talking to a pathologist who has been running his practice for 2 decades.
Yeah.
Convincing them, that person to be a part of your rollover. How did you build that trust?
No, honestly, one, I didn't do it alone. I did it with my father in the first 1 or 2 transactions. he knew the first sort of acquisition that we did, which was in Chennai. He knew the pathologist there. And it was still very hard, even for him, because even though they were pathologists, even though they were the same age, how does one pathologist tell the other pathologist, I want to, invest in your company? So we worked together to sort of say that he brings in the technical relationship and the know-how, and I brought in the business sense to it. And that's how we constructed sort of the deals from there out. Obviously once we did it once or twice, then there was sort of a playbook sort of to do. Then obviously the integration was not a playbook. It was all, you had to sort of figure it out every step of the way. So like I said, we worked together closely for the first 2, 3, 4 years. Post that, I felt like, look, now I can take this on my own and sort of take it forward. And honestly, the biggest challenge was to take a clinic or a lab, which was a doctor's lab, and to convert that into an institution. Before going to the acquisitions, I would say that was the harder part, because you are introducing ideas and concepts to medical people about business, which they don't relate to. And in those days, business was a bad word. Profit, commercial was a bad word.
Especially in healthcare.
In healthcare, I'm saying. Right? It was a very bad word. So I remember meeting first the pathologists and the technicians, and they were like, yeah, you're a business person. These things we don't do in healthcare. And what was I suggesting? Let's use email. I was not suggesting like, let's go and do marketing. I was saying, let's use email. They were like, no. We have to say everything word to word. Then, for example, I was saying, look, you're ordering today materials. Each of you calls up vendors and tells them, ke bhej do. I said, this is not the way. We have to have a centralized department. We have to have documents that go out. We have to validate these kits. We have to do X, Y, Z. No, this is not how it works. So the change management actually was very difficult. Because one, like you said, people felt ये तो बच्ची है. Second, तो इसको कुछ पता नहीं, medical है नहीं. And third, लड़की है, ये तो अभी यहाँ 3-4 साल है, फिर इसकी शादी हो जाएगी, वो भाग जाएगी यहाँ से. So all these preconceived notions don't help you, and the change becomes harder. But what I learned in that process is that you may not be the things that people wish you were. I was not male, I was not old, I was not medical background. But I had knowledge that they did not have, and they had knowledge I did not have. And therefore, if we could earn mutual respect by adding to each other's knowledge, then there is a way to earn respect for yourself without diminishing them.
Sure.
And that was the journey.
At times, it's not necessarily a handicap. It may be a strength as well, because you were able to look at things from a very fresh lens. If you were a doctor, probably
it would have been maybe more of the same, right? Because, doctors are technically geared in depth, in a master of something. They're not jack of many things. And frankly, as a business graduate, I'm a master of nothing. I only have a jack of many, many things, right? So it kind of is very complementary, synergistic, if you have and you learn to respect each other for what you bring to the table.
Yeah. Plus, I have also seen that a lot of doctors who have very successful clinics, they think that they have a business, but actually their business employs them, because even if they are gone for a week,
that's right,
the business is no more there.
That's right.
So Ameera, when you were growing your chain, why did you go through this route? Why not go full stack and grounds up?
See, healthcare is a very hyper-local business, and 20 odd years ago, it was even more so.
Sure.
Right? I mean, just to give you an example, there was no chain. Right? In Bombay, there were every suburb. Like while my father had his lab, Dr. Sushil Shah's lab in Kamdevi, in next door in Baikala, there was somebody else who was really strong. In Chopati, there was somebody who was very strong. So each of you had a certain area that you were the number one in. But in a city like Bombay alone, right, there were like 10 sort of giants sitting there and controlling the market. And then you had, besides those 10 who were the leaders, you had another 1,000 labs who were all there on every street. So practically, firstly, the name Dr. Shah's lab was known in one part of Bombay.
Okay.
So you can be successful even if you say, okay, I'll do it in Bombay. But how are you going to go to Chennai? How are you going to go to Delhi? Nobody knows you. How are you going to establish your relationship and your presence? And let's say you go and you open a shop and you put Metropolis as a name. At those days, it was not a brand that sold. It was the individual relationship that sold. Right? There was a trust of an individual. So you still had to go and locally hire a doctor. Right? Now, locally hiring a doctor who's going to look at 9 to 5 is not going to make you make a difference in that market. So the best thing was to actually bring on board a pathologist who had already had ownership, had a sense of their own practice, and they also had their challenges. So
Yeah.
to say, how can we band together as a group of indigenous pathologists who have all coexisted in India in different parts of the country and come together again under a common umbrella of Metropolis before the MNCs and before the corporate chains come in? How do we do this for ourselves? And that's
Sure.
really how Metropolis came about.
And post the handshake, how difficult it was for you to make everyone follow the same SOPs?
Very hard. Very hard. Very hard because pathologists are entrepreneurs, they're their own bosses and they are medical. So they do genuinely believe they know it, and they do. The medical side, they do know. But they've also run their own businesses in some way, their own labs. So they also have done IT, they also have done admin, they also have done HR, and they don't see those things as subspecialties. They think कि वो सब ठीक है, मैंने कोई HR manager hire कर दिया, I know more than them. So there tends to be a mindset of saying that, look, I know it all. Now, what are you going to teach me? So getting to change is actually quite difficult. But having said that, I'll tell you the pathologists we've worked with, whether it was Dr. Srinivasan, who was one of our first pathologist partners in Chennai, whether it's our partners, Dr. Pranav Desai and Shefali Desai, Dr. Ravi Kumar, Vani Kumar, and so Dr. Patel, so many of them. I have been just blown away by how, while they may have started saying, look, we know what we are doing, how that evolution and that journey has progressed for them. They all opened up, they all started learning, even with resistance, with change. Many of them didn't know their revenues. Some of them had never heard the word EBITDA before. In fact, 90% had never heard the word EBITDA before, right? So some of them used to just put cash in a theli and take it home. They didn't even know what was the revenue of the lab every day. So, the journey from where they came to where they are now, I feel really proud and happy that we've shared that journey together, because today you put them on a table and across a business deal and they can do the acquisition and they can talk that language.
Can you give us some anecdotes? First few initial partners, did they also grow multiple X along with the...
Absolutely. And that's been the story. The story has been that we told all these pathologist partners that, look, like, for example, I'll take Dr. Pranav Desai. When I remember who's in Surat, and Shefali, their husband and wife couple. And I remember their lab was 3.5 crores revenue per month, approximately, right? And per year, approximately. So 30 lakhs a month was their revenue per month, 3.45 crores a year. And when we approached them and we did the deal in 2007. And then we started, that was one lab. They had nothing more than that. And that was also a little bit old and not in the most modern shape, etc. But they were young and they wanted to make changes. And they were willing to learn. So we worked together. And I mean, today you see that market is completely different. Today, forget about 35 lakhs, 30 lakhs a month. You're now doing 3.5 crores a month, right? So you have moved 10x. Wow. Now, the difference was that at that time, we told them, please don't sell 100%. Sell a percentage, but don't sell all of it. So actually, at that point, they sold 60-70% and they retained 30% of their shareholding. Okay. And at the time of public issue, like in 2019, they stock swapped their 30% in the sub into Metropolis, the parent. Wow. So even today, they are shareholders in the parent. Wow. So they have created wealth for themselves, not only as the business went from 3.5 crores a year to 35-40 crores a year, but also in the Metropolis upside. And that's what we tell all the pathologist partners, that this is not our profit to make alone, it's our journey together. Sure. You have skin in the game, take a little bit of risk.
Amazing. Let's break down your journey in Metropolis into 3 legs. As an outsider, I'm oversimplifying it. Pre-2016, 2016 to 24. And of course, now you have a professional CEO.
Yeah.
So let's discuss the first leg. At what point of time did you realize that you should bring in external capital partners and put your foot on the gas?
2005.
What were the signs that gave you that confidence?
2 things. So we had done a couple of acquisitions internally through our internal accruals, right? Mm-hmm. So since 2001 or 2002, when we started, the profit of the company was maybe 1.5-2 crores EBITDA. So profit would have been 1.5 crores. And what we did was we only took a salary, right? So from 2001, by the way, till 2015, 16, till that first phase, we only took a salary. Okay. So my salary initially was 15,000 rupees a month. Wow. It went to 50,000, 1 lakh, 2 lakhs, and it sort of hovered there for a while. My father also only took a salary. And we actually put all the profits of the company back into the company, which we used then to do some of these acquisitions. Right. By 2005, we realized that, we've got already 5 labs now. We had gone from 1 lab to 5 labs. And we said, look, if we want to grow and we want to do acquisitions, we don't have enough profit in the company to use the retained earnings. You can't raise debt to do acquisitions.
Yeah.
So we said, we kya kare? So we had no choice but to go to private equity. So I remember attending some conference. And one thing about me was that my bosses, when I was an intern at 18, always said this, that Ameera is like a sponge. So wherever I go, I like to learn. I ask a lot of questions and I like to sponge information and take it back and think what I want to do. So I remember attending randomly some conference, business conference, and they were talking about private equity. So I studied the whole thing, I understood the whole process, was very curious about how it can work. And I said, okay, this is now going to work for us. So I appointed a banker, we did the IM, we did all of that stuff. We got term sheets, chose a party, got money into the business.
This is ICICI Ventures.
This was ICICI Ventures, was our first investor. So that's how we decided to take more cash.
And how did things change after that? Speed.
Quite a fair amount. So I mean, while we may have done 2 acquisitions between 2001 and 2005, between 2005 and 10, I think we did maybe, if I'm not mistaken, 6, 7, right? And obviously grew organically as well. So the speed certainly increased. We also learned about governance, which we had no idea about before, because most promoters, treat their companies like their personal piggy bank. And don't have a concept of separation. And how do you create that separation? How do you put audit? How do you put, governance? How do you make sure that people, are being accountable for things? So all of that concept came in with the first private equity guys with ICICI. And they were good partners on the board in the way that they understood that we knew what we were doing, but they brought in some of these other additional parts of it. And they were very helpful also, because I remember in 2009, 2010, when they were exiting, they did a very amicable exit with us in the way of saying, look, we'll ensure that we sell only to somebody that you're very comfortable with and you're happy with and all of that.
Sure. In that first leg, what is the one thing that you wish you could have done differently?
Bring better quality of talent and then bring better quality of technology. I think the 2 big failures for us over many, many years has been, and I say the first and then the second, and that's a sequence for a reason, is because, for example, we signed up with SAP at the time in 2008, right? But if you look at the SAP implementation that we did, we only used 20% of actual SAP. And that's because it's a reflection of the people who are actually on the ground. You can't do an SAP implementation without people who know what they are doing. You may get the best partners, but you can't even have a successful implementation if you don't have a good team. So bringing a good quality team is the first step before you get great technology, before you put processes, before you do anything. And I think we were lacking there for many reasons. We had some obstructions on the board, etc. Some difficult people to work with, but we landed up getting good talent later. But that was a bit late, I felt.
Let's start with the second leg now. When you took over as the CEO and MD of the company, what were the first few things, immediate priorities in your mind to cover up for the, so to say, the lost years in the, let's say, the first leg of your journey?
I was the CEO MD of the company from pretty early on. So not 2016, but much earlier. So, those things happened much earlier, like around 2008, 2009. I think the challenge was different. The challenge was the title is one thing, empowerment is another thing.
Makes sense.
Right? And while the early days between 2001 and 2008, I had other titles. I was really running the show, but the titles were with other people, right? And that became another challenge.
Got it.
Once I got the titles and the other people, and some of the other people had to move into non-executive positions, then life got easier. Then actually I took the company from a 15% EBITDA to a 28% EBITDA in 3 years, because the way it was being run earlier had its own challenges, right? It was not integrated. It was, you do acquisitions, but you leave them alone. You don't put controls. You don't put governance. You don't get the juice out of the acquisition, right? Or your organic growth is not showing up. So, but to your question, 2010 to 15, once ICICI exited, Warburg Pincus came in. And that was a period where they backed me fully on the board again. And I was able to, as the MD of the business, be able to execute all the things I wanted. And I made a big change of pivoting to retail business at that time. So till 2012-13, actually Metropolis was a majority B2B business.
B2B is when, for the sake of our viewers,
You
B2B,
pick up samples from hospitals and labs where they outsource specialized samples
so
to
the
us.
users or the consumer does, or the patient don't know that it is
That's
being
right.
processed by Metropolis.
That's right. Well, they knew because our reports were still going to them in
Sure.
most of the cases.
Sure.
But you're not engaging with the patient directly.
Got it.
You're engaging with the sample, right? Because as a consumer, you've gone somewhere else. So we did not have that many number of centers. We only had, our lab. We had very few centers, 3, 4, 5 centers in the whole city of Bombay. And all these other labs and hospitals collected the sample. They did the routine test and they outsourced the specialized test to us.
Got it.
And I could see how that business model was going to suffocate us in the future. And I felt an urgent need to say we need to pivot. Because what would happen is the hospitals would outsource the test. Then when they had enough volumes, they would get their own machine and insource it naturally. So what happened is every year your customer was becoming your competitor.
Sure.
How is that a business model that is scalable? Right?
That's also a model where you have to bid the lowest in order to get
That's right. So I said, look, it's time now to move to retail. And that required a complete revamp of the organization because the mindset was so deep rooted in B2B. The mindset was all about working with them. And it also meant going to B2C. It meant risking the B2B.
Sure.
Right? Because you go and set up a center next to a lab who's outsourcing to you. The lab is going to get upset.
Yeah.
So it was a big punt that I took at that point of time. But I did it because I felt, look, I had to make the change and I had to make the move. So that was in 2013 that I started making the switch. Obviously, it took a few years for it to play out. But that's when we took the first initial punt. 2015 was the year when we had to give Warburg Pincus an exit. And we did that where I acquired the shares of Warburg Pincus. We had a very difficult investor on board who was just making life difficult for me, for Warburg, for everybody. And finally, because I had made a commitment to Warburg that I had brought them in and I needed to give them an exit. And we were not able to do it because of the complexity. I took personal debt and I bought out their shares at a fair market value. Not at a cheaper price, but at a full market value. They made a good 3x return. More than that, actually, they made a 4x return almost on their money. And I gave them a clean exit. And then I moved from where I was at 36% to a 65% shareholding. And then the investor who we had, the hostile investor, finally 6 months later exited to Carlyle. And then it was a clean cap table where Carlyle had 35% and I had 65%.
Did you have to pledge your assets or your shares?
I had to pledge 100% of my shares.
Wow.
It was a huge risk. I mean, honestly, I would say in my lifetime, that's been the biggest risk I took. Where on a personal name, this was not on company, on my personal name, I took a 600 crore
to increase your shareholding.
To increase my shareholding because I was stuck in a situation which was causing a lot of distress, not only to me, but to the business. Sure. It was not allowing clean decision making. You know, it's like when mother and father are fighting, the child cannot be happy.
Sure.
And that's what was happening to Metropolis. Metropolis was suffocating because you did not have alignment on the board. Sure. And my only point was, Metropolis is my child and I'm not going to allow the suffocation. And therefore, I will fight to make sure that I'm able to free it from the clutches so that it's able to live its own destiny, right? Whatever that is. And the choice in my mind was let it be, why fight, let it go, let it continue, or get that freedom for it. And that freedom for it meant me losing possibly everything because I had to risk everything for it.
Yeah.
But it's like a tiger with its cub, right? When it's your child, you don't care. It's like I need to do whatever I can to protect it, and that was my feeling at that point of time.
Did you have your moments of doubt?
Huge moments of doubt every day. I mean, I would wake up in a panic at 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock, and that doesn't. I sleep pretty well. I used to wake up every day in a panic at 4 o'clock because 600 crore debt means what? And I was taking it at a 20% interest.
Wow.
Okay, so where am I going to cough up that much amount of money on an annual basis? Where am I going to get that cash from? I don't come from a rich business family. I had only taken a salary for the last 15 years. All the money I had put back in the company. So where was it going to come from? So it required severe planning, lots of nights of just detailing how I'm going to pull this off, consulting a lot of people. Most people, 90% of people told me I was crazy to do what I was doing. A few people really helped me by just saying, okay, let's brainstorm this. Let's think of ideas. And even that indirect brainstorming with me gave me a sense of support and hope that I could pull this off. And finally we did.
It also meant putting a timeline for you to go public, right? Because that's the only way you could have...
It meant a timeline for many things, honestly, Vivek, because 2016, once I acquired the shares, that was not the, I could feel very great, okay, I managed to do this. But now I had a 600 crore debt that was compounding. That meant I had to figure out what's my next plan. And the hostile investor who had exited, even though he had signed a non-compete and all of that, he breached it in a few months. So there was also an attack on the business at the same time. So your business is under attack. Your employees are being stolen.
Similar geography, similar business models.
Everything was done directly to compete with us, right?
Okay.
So your business is being stolen, your employees are being stolen. At the same time, you have this interest and debt to pay off. So it was not an easy situation. It was a very difficult time to be. But my thoughts were this, that I said, look, it's time to take the punt. It's time to now, as an entrepreneur, put my money where my mouth is and take a stake on myself. What I was punting on was myself to say, I can pull this off. So I brought a team on board. I fought the battles when people were trying to poach our people, poach our business. I fought it. Some went, some stayed. It's okay. The businesses that went, honestly, in hindsight, I'm happy they went, because they were anyway poor quality businesses that were there and they exited us. And in 2-3 years, we found, we were still able to do well and we were still able to this, and I was able to get dividends out of the business. I put all the dividends back to my interest. And then 2019, I said, okay, now it's time to exit this debt, because it had become 600, it become 900. So I said, this is not safe for me or the business. You have one bad time and one bad year, let's say, for example, and the whole business can go kaput. So I said, I don't want to take that risk. So we went public. And even then it was a choice, because I'll tell you, when we went public, it was 6 months after ILFS.
Okay.
And I don't know if you remember, but ILFS had damaged the financial system really badly. Sentiments were the weakest. Nobody wanted to invest in India. Markets were really bad. We were the first IPO that came out after ILFS happened. And I knew that we were getting underpriced by 25%. So the choice I had was get underpriced by 25% and sell your shares that you have worked so hard for at a 25% discount and pay off your debt or half your debt, or continue to live in risk, and then you may lose everything. And when I evaluated that choice, I said, it's better to hold something than have nothing at all. I sold 15% of my equity at a 25% discount, and I exited half my debt. And that was, again, a very smart and a wise move at the time, because each of these moves landed up moving us from a very risky thing that we did to more and more safety. And it's okay to do something risky, but then you also need to do things that stabilize it later.
Sure. Tell us about the turnaround story once the board was, let's say, the composition changed in your favor and when you had absolute control over the course of your business. What were the top 3 strategy change? One was, of course, the revenue mix in favor of retail. What were some other few things that you did?
So, you have to remember that out of the business, we had some of the, like I said, the weak quality businesses had exited. So, for example, we had a business in Middle East that shut down. We had a business in Sri Lanka that shut down. We had a partner in Pune who, we separated with. So all these 3 pieces meant that now the business was lesser by almost 100, and in South Africa we exited. So the business was lesser by almost 150 crores, right? So it meant to now say, okay, where am I going to focus my energies? What kind of business do I want to build? What kind of team do I want to have? What kind of culture do I want to build? Because it also meant changing the culture. It also meant many things. So the things I did was, one, the team I brought on board, I gave them good ESOP. Right? And I created alignment to the organization, and I was willing to share that upside and that value with them. So that was one of the things. The second is at that time I got in some people from domain and some from outside domain, because I didn't have the time to really train completely people from outside domain, because I was under attack. So I needed to sort of bring some people from domain. So brought those people. That was the second thing we did. Third thing is, most importantly, that while we were getting attacked, the survivor instinct was to hit back. But hitting back meant a diversion of energy.
That's very, very tempting, by the way.
It's very tempting, because you're being hit every day. And you also say, okay, I'll also show you. That's the natural instinct, right? But to stop, to pause and to say, do I want to embattle myself and engage with somebody who is non-focused and therefore is just hitting? Or do I want to be the wiser person and say, let me focus on my business because I have debt? That
Sure.
person doesn't have debt.
Sure.
So looking at your own context and saying, where do I want to spend my time and energy? And honestly, what I did was I put horse blinders and I said, I don't care what you're doing. I'm going to build my business. And I built my business in a rock solid foundational way, rather than doing things which were opportunistic like we had done in the past, or by getting embattled and engaged in conflict and litigations which were not going to take me anywhere. And that was a very important choice as well.
Sure. So retreating from non-performing geographies and not opening too many fronts.
Yeah.
Great. Let's talk about the Metropolis business, Ameera. From a user perspective, now I think the revenue mix is about 60% retail.
Yeah.
How as a user would I choose a lab? What is the USP of Metropolis, and how, more importantly, how do you communicate it? Because let's say one thing that I've always realized is my investigation reports are always ordered by my doctor, and the clinician also has a preference.
That's right.
For or against certain laboratory chain. I've read about, or actually I followed a YouTube video where you very nicely explained the 149 steps that you take. But does the consumer actually care? And if the consumer cares, how do you communicate it to the consumer? And my third question is the decision maker actually the doctor or the patient?
So it's both and neither, depending on the situation. So let me put a context to it. Firstly, when people are well, like you, me, and all of us sitting here, and we are healthy, we think we know it all, and we think we can go to Google and research stuff. So when we are healthy, we'll say who's got wellness packages, who's giving discount, who's giving fast service, who's doing this, who's doing that. Actually, we assume as consumers in India that all labs are the same, and therefore now I can make my choice based on price and this. But the minute I tell people that, by the way, there are 300,000 labs in India, 99.99% are not accredited by anybody.
Not even NABL?
No, NABL is accredited to 2,000 labs.
Out of 3 lakh?
Out of 3 lakh labs,
okay.
Right? Which means there is nobody watching what is happening. There is no government body who's going and checking whether somebody is even doing the test. There is no government body checking whether the pathologist is signing the report. Nobody checks. So you have to decide and say, do I want to go to a lab where there is no checking happening at all, and am I willing to entrust something as important as my health decision to that institution or that organization, right? Now, if you are an educated, aware person, you will say, hey, I am going down that road, my health is too important. I need to go somewhere where at least somebody is checking something, right? So that's the first step. Then you come to the NABL labs. And you may say, okay, now I assume all NABL labs are the same, which they are not, by the way. There is a huge difference even between the NABL accredited labs. But let's assume for a minute you assume all are the same.
Sure.
Then you will start to say, okay, how sick am I? Now, let's say you have a fever. You go to a GP or you go to a normal sort of doc who's not a super specialist. And the doc will say, go wherever you want, or you will say, I'll go somewhere close to my house. I want a report in 3 hours, or I know this doctor had somebody will come home and collect the sample, etc. That's one situation. The decision will be largely you, and possibly your doctor may influence it. By you will ask the doctor, can I go here? The doctor will say, idhar mat jao, but yahan pe 3 jagah mein kidhar bhi chale jao. So together you will make that call. But now let's say somebody in the family has cancer. The situation is very different. When you have cancer, you don't know anything. You don't even start with the premise you know anything. Yeah. You actually are saying, I'm dependent on my doctor to take care of me. God help me. And then what happens is you actually are seeking expert advice on many things. You are not saying, I'll go to the lab next door. You are thinking, who's the best lab for cancer? Who's the best doctor for cancer? Because it's so meaningful to you. And that's when you will go to the best doctor, and your best doctor will guide you to the best lab. Right? Because you have to remember, and there's this whole perception that doctors are corrupt and doctors are making decisions for bad reasons, and there's a huge trust deficit that's happened between patients and doctors. And no industry is full of good apples or bad apples. There are a fair number of bad apples in all industries. But I can tell you, I've grown up in the medical industry. I've grown up with doctors as parents. And I can tell you very confidently, there are lots of good doctors out there, and I would say almost 100% of doctors, whatever their choices are commercially, do not want to spoil their patient's life. They actually want to take care of their patient.
Sure.
Right? And they may have a lack of knowledge in some cases. Some of them may not be the most expert. Some of them may not be this. But most of them genuinely want to do the right thing. Right?
Sure.
So at least that's what I've seen. So usually in the cases which are more critical, the doctor's opinion matters more. Now, what is different about Metropolis? Number one is our principle, our ethos, and our culture. And you'll say, why is that important? It's important because in a services business where you have choices, where nobody's checking anything, I can choose not to do the test and still charge you 500 rupees for the report. Or I can choose to give my best and treat that sample as my mother's own sample and give every possible effort I can to that sample and charge you fine. That choice lies with me because we are not in a regulated environment.
Yeah.
Now that's where culture matters. Because when you have a choice, you will go with your philosophy of life. And our philosophy at Metropolis is exactly that. That we are here to serve people, we are here to take care of people, and we are in the business of life and death. Our wrong report about something which you may deem very simple, you may say cholesterol test mein kya hai? For a patient who has a heart disease or has a family of heart disease, a cholesterol test is a very important test without which if your boundary line is 200 and I keep wrongly giving you reports of 180 and you say I'm normal, but actually you're 205 or 220 and you actually need cholesterol lowering drugs. You don't know this and you have a heart attack. We are dealing in the business of life and death. So recognizing the responsibility that we have and treating it with that kind of gentleness is actually what differentiates Metropolis from every other player in the country. It's the culture. After the culture, you then have to put the processes and systems and behaviors that mirror your culture. How do you ensure that quality is the most serious KPI in your business more than revenue? How do you ensure that the experience that the patient gets is not only one of precision at the back end, but compassion at the front end? So one thing which is very important to us is we say that, look, people are coming to us at the most vulnerable time in their lives. They are sick. When we are sick, we all feel weakest. At that point, are you going to be intimidating? Are you going to be authoritative? Or are you going to be compassionate? And our point is we are authoritative at the back end. We are experts in our field. But on the front end, we'll hold your hand and we'll be compassionate. And that's the combination that makes Metropolis unique. Now, how do you communicate this is damn hard, right? And we try, but we try through the experience and less through the words, right? Because these things I can say, but people have to feel it. And when we have a very strong NPS tracking system, a Net Promoter Score, to the point where any customer who says, I'm not happy with this, I'm not happy, your report was late, I did not like your phlebotomist, I didn't like your center, this was not good, that was not good. We make a call to every single customer, we talk to them, we understand the problem, and then we have a loop that goes to fix the problem. This culture of hearing the customer and solving the problems is why our NPS score is the highest in the industry.
Sure. But so I was talking to a health tech VC a few days ago, and one of the things that we ended up arriving at is, so the question was about why good businesses do not get built in 6-7 years. Say for example, if we pick diagnostic as a sector, there have been a lot of investment and a lot of players have come up, especially after COVID, because the sector has just exploded. The secret sauce of a Metropolis, or for that matter, even let's say Apollo or some other healthcare provider, if the secret sauce is differentiated culture and ethos leading to better clinical outcomes, that doesn't happen in less than 10 or 20 years. Right?
It cannot.
You can't spend money on marketing to communicate that you are differentiated.
You cannot. Because honestly, people also understand they don't make their healthcare decisions based on what they read on a hoarding or what they see in a newspaper. You can get somebody excited by having the picture of Dhoni or the picture of some Bollywood celebrity or somebody on it, but that will only make somebody read it. But after that, when they come to experience your service and they see your reports and the doctor sees your reports, what are they saying about you? That is more important.
Sure. How is Metropolis positioned compared to other, let's say, comparable organized chain? Is it more premium, better quality, or is it more massy, affordable?
No, I think we are certainly the last word in pathology, which means that, when you're really sick and you really need the right answer, you will come to us, right? So we are certainly positioned as the expert, authoritative voice in the area. While, we'll do engagement. So when we start a center, we'll do camps, we'll engage with you in your residential area, etc., because you want to create that visibility. But in the doctor and the healthcare community, there's a very clear understanding that Metropolis is the last word in pathology.
Sure.
Right? And that is on all the most critical tests. So, and like I said, cholesterol may seem like a non-critical test, but for a cardiac patient, it's a critical test. So actually, it's not about the test, it's about the disease. If you're perfectly healthy, right, like I said, in your mind, you don't think the quality matters so much. But I always tell people you're mistaken on that. Because if you're perfectly healthy and somebody gives you an 19-20 result, you may say 19-20 theek hai, kya farak padta hai?
Sure.
But it is the 19-20 that helps you determine the one thing to catch in your body, which was actually not performing well, which is why you did that health checkup in the first place. Now, if you want to just see everything is normal because it makes you feel happy, then you're only trying to justify your emotion. But instead, a health checkup is meant to find the one thing which is not working in your body, so you have a chance to fix it. So the precision of 99.999% is very critical. The 99% is not enough.
So if your positioning is being the gold standard in pathology, then it also would mean that in the last few years, apart from growing in terms of span, let's say more number of clinics, have you also gone deep in specialized tests?
Absolutely. So we are adding almost 100 varieties of new tests every year. We have the maximum contribution of specialty business in Metropolis. It's about 37%, and we announced core. With that, it will become 41% business. Will come only from super specialty and specialty tests, which is the highest in the industry. So not only do we keep expanding the test menu, but our focus on quality and our focus on experience is surpassing everybody else, right? And that focus is what actually differentiates, because doctors see it, doctors feel it every day.
Sure. Let's talk about your geographic presence, Ameera. I really liked the way you framed it in one of your interviews. So you defined some cities as focus cities where you already have presence and you want to go deeper. Then there were some seeding cities and the 500 city concept. Why don't you take us through this strategy?
See, what we said was that basically, like I said, healthcare is a hyper-local business. A lot of people talk about regional brands, right? Because they say, oh, I'm in North, or I'm in East, or I'm in South, etc. What we've actually seen is there is no brand, including Apollo or including Metropolis or Medanta or Max or anybody, which is a regional brand. Because, for example, one of these hospitals may be strong in certain cities in the region, but doesn't mean they are leaders everywhere in the region.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
You may still go to markets where somebody doesn't know these healthcare brands at all. They might have heard of them, but the local brand may be stronger than the national brand. So because the business is so hyper-local, we decided to look at it on a city-wise approach and not a region-wise approach.
Okay.
So we identified cities which are in the west and south of India, because that's where we are overall leaders if you look at a market share basis. We identified cities like Bombay, Chennai, Bangalore, Rajkot, Surat, Nasik, Goa, Chennai, etc., where we are leaders in these markets. We are number one in most of them, or maximum we are number two. And these are markets in which we believe the runway for growth is long and we can get deeper. So these we call as our focus cities. So our goal here is build a B2C business, go deeper, build infrastructure closer and closer to the patient, give a fantastic experience, make sure your quality is great, keep building doctor trust and relationships. That's the modality. The second one, which we call seeding cities, are cities in which we may not be the leading player in terms of a consumer brand. We may be the number 3, 4, 5 player, and we have more B2B business where we are working with hospitals and medical community. So those are the markets where we say, look, actually we need to build more infrastructure because somebody else has better infrastructure than we do in terms of labs, in terms of collection centers. Somebody else has a better technical operations than we do. Somebody has better consumer brand than we do. So these are markets we need to seed. We need to nurture. We need to, over time, build leadership in by first making the product much better, making the service much better, building our relationships better. So those are the seeding markets. And we've identified about 10 cities like this. And then there's the rest of the country, which you're going and creating a presence. You may not be a leader, but these are all your spokes in which you're collecting samples to feed your hubs.
Got it. Does this also mean, because the relentless focus on the focus cities, does it also mean that international is on hold for some time?
No, international business continues to grow well for us. It's a small part of our business. It's a sub 10, single digit part of our business contribution. But it's a business we like because, we've managed to take the same model of India, B2C and B2B, and establish it in Africa. We are now the leaders in many of these countries, or number 2 in many of these countries in a much shorter period than we would have done in India. The market there is virgin. There's a lot of opportunity. The competition is lesser.
Okay.
And we are able to, more importantly, use our knowledge and use our assets from India to leverage there. Because
Sure.
the talent there is much smaller pool. The pool of talent is much smaller than is India. So we use talent from there, and we bring specialized samples from there to India, and we sweat our assets in India.
Sure.
So it's actually very synergistic in the way we do it.
And your network expansion approach, of course, you just closed a transaction. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
But is it still growing by the way of acquisitions, or are you now launching more and more cities and center on your own?
See, organic growth is our mainstay.
Okay.
Majority of our growth comes through organic growth. Inorganic is we do for strategic opportunities to get stronger in a region. So, for example, if you see the last acquisition we did was in 2021. Now we are in 24, end of 24.
Okay.
So, in the last 3 years, we have not really done any acquisition. In fact, in the last 3 years, we've added almost 90 labs in India, which we've actually increased our lab capacity by almost 40-50%. So, that is all organic growth. Our collection center network has gone from 2,500 to 4,500. We have 4,500 centers picking up samples. So, the organic is the mainstay, but these opportunities in inorganic help us either get a new capability, help us establish a new therapeutic segment, or they help us build strength in a particular geography.
Got it. So the three key pillars of your strategy, so to say, is network expansion, focus on more specialized tests, and focus on the B2C revenue, which has a higher margin. Makes sense. There are a lot of new innovative players coming in the market which have picked, let's say, one particular aspect of the diagnostic industry and going all in on that aspect. For example, convenience in the age and era of quick commerce. Now I can order a test and get it within 30 days or so 30 minutes or 40 minutes. What is your take on that? What are some of the new models that you think can potentially address a huge pain point and become big? And by the way, in wake of increasing competition from everywhere, larger hospital chains coming into diagnostic, newer entrants coming, fueled by VC capital, what are some of the steps that you are taking to, let's say, protect your turf?
See, the good thing about healthcare is you can have a lot of Me Toos, but in any part of healthcare, the ones who really win are the ones who have expertise. I'm very clear on that. This is what I've seen for the last 25 years in healthcare. Because at the end of the day, this is not an industry in which people, they want to go for the best. The most unaffording person, when their mother is sick, will take them to a private doctor, and finally they don't go to a government hospital. No? They'll go to a private doctor who they think is the best. Right? So for education for our kids and for healthcare for our family, we are willing to spend the money and go to the best possible availability. Right? So therefore, in any sector, it's like today if I say, okay, now yaar, hospitals are a great opportunity, मैं hospital खोलती हूँ. Okay, let's say it's possible. We can. Why not? Metropolis as a brand, capital is easily available. कर सकते हैं. But why do we not? And the reason we don't is not because we can't. It's because the question is, what is your right to win?
Yeah.
Why is Metropolis and me going to be more capable of building a hospital compared to an Apollo, Max, Medanta or somebody else? What am I going to do different? And if I'm not doing something different and better, then why do I deserve to doing it at all?
Sure.
So that is my approach to business, because you have to add value in life. But there are many other people who will say, yaar, bas business opportunity hai to kar lo. They're not necessarily looking to be the best at something, right? So it works for different people in different ways, right? But, from our perspective, the way we've always seen competition is the market is large. There is a huge unorganized sector. The unorganized sector is made of good apples and bad apples. We would hope patients and citizens of India get only good apples. If organized sector wants to come in and do things the right way and make an impact in society and earn a living, we have no problem with it. Please come, aa jao. But our only request to everybody is, please do it with maximum expertise and do your best, because we are dealing in life and death. Don't treat it as a business which only makes returns, but treat it as a profession, right? But otherwise, honestly, we think our track is strong enough on our own. Whatever competition comes in, it doesn't take away from what we need to do for ourselves, and it doesn't change our growth.
Sure.
So competition is welcome.
I mean, I was looking at your P&L. The top three cost line items were cost of manpower, cost of materials, and amortization. Let's talk about the cost of manpower bit. That is something, if human capital is one of the largest input cost, how do you hire humans with consistency, with predictability? How do you train them at scale to fuel your expansion?
Look, I mean, I think The question is, are you hiring for skills? Are you hiring for culture? And I think the answer is different in different places. In some cases, we've in the past I've seen we've hired for skills or we've hired
Okay.
for domain. And that actually is a change that we've made in our organization. So in the last, I would say 3-4 years, I'm hiring much more, or maybe even 5-6 years, I'm hiring much more for culture
Okay.
and value alignment than I'm hiring for domain. In fact, if you look at my leadership team, there's nobody from domain, maybe 1 or 2 people out of 10,
Wow.
right? Because that domain doesn't have that pool of talent that I want, right? The capability level I want and the value system I want is not always there. So I'm looking at other industries to say, where do I find general capability and where do I find value system alignment? And then domain we'll teach, right? So we are trying actually our hiring to change in the way we are doing it. But you have to look for people who align to your values. You have to look for capability, and the training is most important. Nobody can be born brilliant, and nobody first day they come to you are going to give you exactly what you need. And therefore, I think having the ability internally to really be able to skill your people and to be able to really get them to a level of training that you're happy with. And I won't say we are there 100% yet. There are, healthcare also has a high attrition. Our attrition is only 12-13%, but it still means that you're constantly training and hiring new people, right? So it's a journey, but tried to use technology, we've used a lot of culture, we've used a lot of people to say this is a very important part of our business.
Ameera, there's also a lot of excitement about how AI or recent innovations can completely change the way how, let's say, healthcare is delivered in diagnostics as well. Now, we have seen dramatic examples. For example, in pharma, the time to market a drug is cut into half or can potentially be cut into half using AI during clinical trials, etc. In your business, what are some of such, let's say, very powerful use cases of AI or technology that you have seen which could dramatically either enhance clinical outcomes or bring in a lot of efficiencies in your business? Why don't you take us through that?
See, I think AI can have potential from variety of perspectives, but the hype around AI is just crazy. People expect that it's going to take over everything and people are going to suddenly disappear. And I mean, you get such conspiracy theories, it's crazy. But the way I see AI is I think it will certainly help in Indian healthcare in making the teams more productive, that's for sure. They can take on the more manual, labor intensive roles and allow our people to hopefully do more skilled jobs. That's one. I think over time we are able to, hopefully, if we are able to get clean data sets in India, which is still a challenge, hopefully over time we'll be able to bring all knowledge of multiple people together and then be able to make better decisions, right? Because having integrated wisdom of 300 people can only be better than having the wisdom of one individual. So the day we are able to bring those data sets together and be able to do that, I think it can be wonderful in what we can accomplish in terms of the interpretation of test results, in terms of the interpretation of images, in terms of how you treat. Even today, you'll go to, for something as simple as a fever, to a doctor. You go to 5 doctors and each of them have different treatment plans, right? Now, each of that is based on their intuition, their gut, their experience. Now, imagine if all those 5 were to come together in different situations, right? Could you have a better treatment plan that's standardized? I would like to believe so. But that's going to take a long time. It's not going to happen overnight. I mean, today we don't even have electronic data images and reports or anything, right? So we don't even have electronic reports for everything. We may give you pathology reports electronically, but that's not integrated into your doctor consultation, your hospital reports or this. So you don't even have today as an individual an electronic file on yourself. So to talk about AI is going to take over everything is a little bit away. It'll happen, but it's a little bit away.
So we're far from a future where robots replace pathologists in your labs.
I don't see it.
Okay.
I mean, we had this, I think a famous bank in India who put a robot there. It finally was a robot in one location or in one bank as an entertainment value and not really a replacement value.
Sure. Ameera, now healthcare is a very interesting space from the lenses where I look at it, because we come from venture side. Now there's a excitement in healthcare both on the public market as well as in the private equity side is at all-time high. Whereas if you look at venture side, entrepreneurs, very muted response with regard to building in healthcare. Even on the investor sides, we are yet to see breakout outcomes coming. What do you think is missing in founders or in investors on the venture side of things in healthcare?
Actually, it's not what's missing in founders or investors. The ecosystem doesn't support startup founders in healthcare to do it. And the reason why is, what are the moats? The moats in healthcare, at the end of the day, what each healthcare organization is trying to build is trust. Trust is equal to profit in healthcare. When you don't have trust, you don't make money in healthcare. And trust doesn't come easily, it takes time. And you have to build a brand that reflects trust, and you have to maintain a brand that reflects trust. So what happens often in a startup's case is, when you're coming with no brand at all, it takes a long time to build trust, but the patience levels of startup founders is low. The patience level of investors is low. And that's the reason why you're seeing a 95% demise of healthcare startups in the ecosystem. So I would, if 2-3 things could be edited, I think we would be more successful. One is, like I said, people have to build businesses for truly making an impact in healthcare, and not because they're chasing the next valuation. That's the thing that startup founders have to change. Like those of us who have worked 25 years in healthcare, you can't see healthcare and say, "Arey, मैं कुछ amazing बना दूंगा, 5 साल में मैं बेच दूंगा, and then I'll move on to my next startup." It doesn't work like that. And investors also have to approach it not from a business angle alone, but from a perspective of saying, I'm transforming the industry.
Sure.
And that patient capital is going to take 10 years. It's not going to happen in 5 years for sure. And the ecosystem, for example, I would, one of the things which I'm trying to promote is an entrepreneurial model within Metropolis. So, for example, I think the chances, if large incumbents like us were able to work well with startup founders and their companies to give them a launching pad to act. Actually, if you ask me, the chances of success are very high, 90%. But where it's failing is startup founders all want to do everything on their own. They don't want to actually take the help because they want to sort of be the courageous, I did it on my own sort of thing, not realizing that your chances of success on your own are probably 10%. Your chances of success with a brand are probably 90%. So if the outcome is to build a successful platform where your product becomes a reality, why would you not choose the way which actually is more likely to be successful? So that's where I think startup founders are not understanding, and incumbents, right, are not able to find a model to work well with startup founders or giving them the empowerment, taking a minority stake and giving them a platform. Incumbents are saying, I want to control.
Sure.
I think if we can find that right balance, I think we can actually build a brilliant ecosystem.
Sure. A lot of time we entrepreneurs come with the mindset of disruption because that is what the Silicon Valley playbook.
That's right.
Here you are building for the provider, you are building for the payer, you are building for the clinicians, you are building for the patients. The incumbents can't be disrupted.
It cannot be. And I'll tell you, the most likely chances are incumbents disrupting themselves and evolving in that direction.
Sure.
And that can happen, but it can happen with the help of startups. Because I'll tell you also, incumbents are not innovative. Actually, the startups guys bring innovation. That partnership has to work.
Sure. On that note, let's do a rapid fire, Ameera. If you were to go back to world today, what were be the top 2 healthcare ideas to which you will give a check?
What are the 2 ideas I'd give a check? I think I'm about to give check to many ideas, but I certainly believe there is a big opportunity for aggregating the hospital space. I think there's a great opportunity for building an orthopedic chain. I think skilling, there's a great opportunity in what you guys are trying to do. I think there's a great opportunity in mental health, great opportunity in IVF, many areas.
Yeah.
Many areas.
So for viewers who are watching this show, you know who to contact. We'll leave the details of your family office in the comments.
Don't put my cell number.
Okay. Ameera, in your professional journey, what is the best piece of advice that you have received as a CEO and from whom?
I've received many good pieces of advice from many people. It's about hearing it. One piece of advice when I took this humongous risk in 2015, Deepak Parekh told me, and he said, when I was talking to him and I was, he saw I was about to take this risk. And he was, by the way, one of the few people who did not discourage me. He encouraged me. And I'll always be grateful to him for that. And he told me, he said, Ameera, you're about to take a massive jump from a building. And you have no safety net. If you fly, great. If you crash, you're in trouble. So, since you are the caretaker of your family, you need to take out a little bit of money from the business and put it away into a safe deposit and lock it up and do not invest it in equity. Do not invest it in anything risky. Don't put it in real estate. Don't do anything with it. Put it in a fixed deposit and make sure that you're earning safe returns on it. Because if everything bombs and you fall and you splat and there's blood all over the floor, you still have this money. You may lose everything, but you will still have this money to take care of your family. And what's amazing is that single action which I did actually allowed me to take more risk. Because when you have created a little safety net for yourself and you know you're not about to crash and die, you actually have the ability to fly high. So that was actually a very, very valuable piece of advice for me. I would say the second has been trying to think who gave it to me. I can't remember off the top of my head now. But I remember somebody early on told me about how what I don't do and what I say no to is actually more important than what I say yes to. And I actually experienced this in our business from 2001 to 2010, when there was too much opportunistic growing and expansion happening. Oh, there's somebody willing to give you business here, grow here. Somebody's willing to give you a contract here, go there. Random, not strategic growing. I realized that when you keep accepting every opportunity that comes your way and you don't say no, you actually diverse and disperse your energies in so many different directions that you build a very complex and a very unwieldy business. And you may then have a small choto business sitting somewhere far away. But when a problem hits that business, your entire attention will be running there.
Yeah.
And you will actually forget about your core.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why after 2010, I unraveled many of these complex and just random things we were doing. And I said, you know what, we have to be focused. We have to say no. If I'm going to say yes once, I have to say no 5 times. Because choosing what I spend my energy on is very important. So even till this date, if I add something to my life, I exit something from my life.
Sure.
So for example, I added being on some global board. I left a local board in India. Because you can keep adding, but then you clutter.
Yeah. And Mindspace doesn't work that way. Something is only 5% of your business doesn't mean that you will need to give it only 5%
Absolutely
of your
right.
Absorb.
Absolutely. Especially you're a passionate entrepreneur, you're still going to put a lot of attention on.
That's a great advice, Ameera. What's your take on, let me qualify that, for people who are in their, let's say, early 20s or 30s, what's your take on the 70-hour work week?
I mean, who's counting is the first question, right? I mean, I feel like this whole conversation around the 70-hour work week, I mean, I know in what context Narayan Murthy meant it was that for nation building, everybody has to work hard. And obviously it was taken in a completely different point about, hey, what about family balance? And frankly, both points are very relevant. And I think it's about just deciding the stage and age of your life. I mean, for example, if you are a young kid who's not married yet and you are choosing to say, hey, I want to passionately drive something, it's your choice, freaking hell, do it. But, the day you do get married and you do have children, that is a responsibility of lives you've also brought into this world. And therefore, I personally believe there is a balance you have to bring in life because your kids, you brought them in.
Yeah.
So you got to give them time. So my choice in my life was to spend from the age of 20 to 40 passionately building Metropolis, which was my first child. And I very consciously chose not to have children at the time. Right? And I chose to have children at 40 and 45, right? Which most people will say, oh, so late in life. But for me, it's been amazing because now I'm not in a stage where I have to run 5 days a week and travel, and I have little children at home as well. I'm able to actually focus my attention on my children and still do the work I enjoy, but not necessarily by running around because I'm not doing the day-to-day anymore. So I think it's up to us to stage our lives, isn't it?
Sure. Thank you for the conversation, Ameera. Before I conclude, I have just last one question for you. You have brought in a professional CEO. Are you going to take a back seat, or how does the third leg of your career in Metropolis look like?
I think bringing in talent doesn't mean taking a backseat. It means changing your role, right? So, for example, there was a point where my role was the passionate driver of the business. My role became the organizer and the CEO of the business. So I moved from being just the passionate entrepreneur to being the CEO, which was a different role. And now I've moved my role to chairperson. My job is what? My job is to keep the soul of the business, to keep the purpose of the business, to keep the governance of the business, to make sure we're not going too fast or too slow, we're not going wrong or right, we are headed in the right direction. So I still eat, sleep, and breathe Metropolis. It's still my first child. It's not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. It's just my role has changed, and it's time now for others to influence Metropolis as much as I have. Because I genuinely believe there are many people much smarter than me in the world, and if they can bring in their influence to my child, why would I say no?
Sure. Did you leave any box unchecked as a CEO that you something that you wanted to do, but I mean, of course, there's 100 of things that somebody who is as aggressive and ambitious as you would want to do, or were you able to check everyone?
No, not at all. I mean, I honestly, I had my time as CEO to do the things I wanted to do, or then my time as chair to do the things I want to do. And I think honestly now, with the combination of the team, my CEO, myself, I actually think we are a far stronger team than it was me alone as a CEO. So I'm actually very happy and excited about the place we're at. Very happy with my team, and I'm very excited for frankly where Metropolis is going to go.
Sure. Thank you for the conversation, Ameera. I hope everyone watching this podcast is as inspired as I am. Thank you for giving your time.
Thanks so much.